Welcome to Huddle Up with Matias Bueno. Today's guest is analyst for Raptors basketball on TSN, as well as March Madness basketball analyst for TSN as well. His nickname is The Coach. It is Jack Armstrong. Jack, thanks for joining me on today's episode. I'm really glad to talk hoops with you, and I know that it's a really exciting time in Toronto with the Raptors being back in TO for this 2021-2022 season.
Hey, Matthias, it's my pleasure. Excited to be on with you. And, just a lot of fun to be back in person, calling games in person and having the experience of, interacting again with fans. And the whole experience is just wonderful. It was a difficult year last year for everybody with the team having to locate to Tampa. They made the best of it. And now it's great to have them back. And they got an exciting young team with a lot of potential, and their best days are ahead of them. So it'll be a fun ride. It'll be a little up and down and twists and turns. It's a young group, but nonetheless very exciting.
The Raptors have had their ups and downs over the last decade with the pre-Masai Ujiri era when Brian Colangelo was the GM, and then Masai Ujiri came, and then they finally started to make the playoffs, stringing together consecutive appearances before finally culminating with an NBA championship in 2018, 2019 when Kawhi Leonard was traded to the Raptors. But now the Raptors have reset a little bit in terms of, like you mentioned, leaning towards their youth with the super young and exciting Scotty Barnes leading the way, as well as the rest of the company. Chris Boucher still in there, Delano Balton, and all the guys for the Raptors are really pulling it together to make for what's been an exciting beginning of the season, despite some ups and downs. What are some of the things that you've seen positives for the Raptors through the course of the early part of the season?
Well, first of all, Fred VanVleet. I think if you look at him right now and then you compare him to what Kyle Lowry was doing at the same age, it's pretty comparable and it's pretty impressive. So obviously, you worry about losing a franchise iconic type of guy in Kyle Lowry and what that void's going to be. And Fred VanVleet's been great. OG Anunoby has taken another major step as a player. I'm really impressed with what he's doing, just his maturity, his polish in terms of reading situations, passing the ball, being able to create, shoot. He's a stellar defender. So those are two guys that are returning players that you look at and you go, wow. Then, they acquired Gary Trent Jr. during the season last year. He's done a fabulous job on both sides of the ball. He's been an incredibly disruptive, intense defender. He's doing a great job offensively, getting his shot off and finding shot opportunities. He's a good player and a good young player. And then I guess, obviously you mentioned Scotty Barnes, Delano Banton. And all the hype's been about Scotty Barnes, but Banton, I tell you what, he's a steal in the second round. He's got a chance to be a very good player down the road. And Scotty Barnes has really impressed me with his maturity, his polish, his know-how, how to play. He passes, he sees the floor. He's just a fun player, and he gets on the glass, he defends. He's got a lot of versatility in his game, and he's just scratching the surface right now. So kind of like a young pup, he's just he's still kind of figuring it all out. But I like the fact, Teo, that they have thrown him in the deep end and made him have to play major minutes and develop quickly. And I think it's going to help him and help the organization long term.
With guys like Banton and Barnes, it's interesting that history seems to repeat itself. There have been a lot of comparisons made between Barnes and Vince Carter in terms of how exciting they are and the flashes that they've had of brilliance early on. And for someone like Banton, the Raptors have seen a very multicultural array of international players come through the organization, as well as a few Canadians. but not many marquee Canadians through the course of franchise history so far. So with someone like Banton being locally from the GTA, it's interesting to see how that might develop in terms of intertwining with where he's from, playing for Toronto, and also being able to be a rising star. Would you say that he's one of the most exciting Canadian players that you've seen come through the Raptors in terms of his the early on part of his career?
Well, obviously, they got Jamal McGraw late in his career. Obviously, Chris Boucher and Ken Birch, different stages of their career. So it's a different thing because he's a draft pick. He's a Toronto kid. He grew up going to Raptor games, Rexdale and all that. So it's a different vibe altogether. So to me, he's intriguing. It's funny. I called his high school All-Star game, a BioSteel All-Star game a number of years ago. And Lou Dort, who plays for the Oklahoma City Thunder, was in that game as well. And but when I watched Banton and I heard that he was going to Western Kentucky University, I'm like, wow, that's a steal. I mean, this guy's a high major player. And then when he transferred to Nebraska, I was still like, Nebraska is kind of respectfully, more of a secondary Big Ten program in basketball. I just felt that he had a much higher ceiling and had great potential. So he's exciting. And, he's going to be a high risk, high reward player, but he sees things. He's got great vision, pushes the ball up the court quickly, can finish at the rim. He can guard. He's got to be a little better with the ball, but that'll come. But to me, I think he's, in terms of protecting the ball, but I think that'll all come. But I like his makeup and his personality on the floor. He's fearless. And, then you mentioned, it's interesting. He reminds me a little more of a Tracy McGrady than he does of Vince Carter. And I've been with the Raptors 24 years, so I got to see Tracy when he was with our Raptors. And there's kind of like, he can impact the game on a number of different fronts. And so they're both fun to watch, and I'm really excited to see how the journey kind of happens and how they kind of have their growing pains and all the challenges that come with it. But they strike me as two very mature young men who are bright, that will kind of figure out how to, adjust and get better. And to me, when I watch them play, I'm really impressed by just how they've adapted to the moment, and they're right in there and they're fearless.
Your nickname comes from the experience you've had with coaching in your home state of New York and being able to provide insight and analysis on the young players of the Raptors, as we've mentioned earlier so far, with seeing how the potential that these guys have to develop may turn out, really comes to just being able to see some of those intangibles sometimes from the coaching experience you've had. And with having been one of the youngest NCAA division head coaches, the youngest ever at the time when you were first hired, is really interesting because there's not many people that get an opportunity to be a part of a program and be the head lead on the court of a program at such a young age. What was it about your instincts and your characteristics that allowed for you the opportunity to be an NCAA head coach at a very, very young age?
I would say I got lucky. I'm not going to pat myself on the back too much because I think I did get lucky. I just happened to be in the right place at the right time. Unfortunately and fortunately, the boss that I worked for was let go, and here I was, the lead assistant, and we're about to start practice in less than 2 weeks. So it just happened to be, circumstantial that they said, well, you're the lead assistant. All right, we're going to name you the head coach. And I had the support of the players. And thankfully, my administration was very supportive. And my one thing was, though, I said, I'm not doing this unless you give me at least a 2-year contract. I'm not going to be a lame duck because it's a hard way to coach. So I had a 2-year guarantee So if after the year they didn't want me, I was still going to get paid another year. So to me, that, you know, having a little conviction and saying, "Hey, look, I'm your guy, and I'm going to prove it." But up front, I want you to know that I want you to have my back. And so they did. And then after that year, I ended up signing a 4-year contract. So to me, it was a big deal having the opportunity to do that. I was a high school coach. I, you know, coached my own team in high school. I was an assistant at Fordham University in New York for Tom Penders and Nick McCarthy. They were great coaches to work for. They also had a JV program at the time at Fordham, and they made me the head coach of that. So while I was an assistant working for them, they also had so I had head coaching experience. And I think that's really important to be able to stand in front of a room, be able to make decisions versus suggestions. And I always encourage guys to try to get as quickly as possible, coach your own team, because there's that 6-inch difference is dramatic. You know, moving from one seat to the other is dramatic. And there's a lot, everyone's hanging on every word you say. So it was a great opportunity for me. I had I coached 2 years of high school and 14 years of Division I NCAA basketball, 9 of those as a head coach. So I feel very fortunate. And now I've been with the Raptors for 24 years. So it's been a tremendous ride. And I always say this, I can't thank that orange ball enough. You know, I had a love affair with that ball when I was 7 years old. Here I am 51 years later. Grew up playing basketball in Brooklyn. And here I am. And that ball has given me 2 careers. That ball has given me some of the great friendships, relationships, moments in my life, because it all started with a love affair of that ball. And, you know, you mentioned, you know, you played football in college, and you know what that means, that brotherhood that you develop with your teammates and your coaches and people in the program, that you can't find that in business. You can't find that in a lot of walks of life. So I'm very grateful to the game of basketball to have that opportunity.
While you were in college, you were studying history, and you are one of 4 boys, while your other brothers were doing everything they could with their ambitious outlook to achieve as highly as possible in the working world. And for someone like yourself just doing history, it seemed that there were some questions as to what were you going to do with history besides maybe talk about the War of 1812. But you mentioned this love affair with basketball. Just an orange ball can change your life forever. When was it that you knew basketball might be something that can take you farther than maybe what you were thinking before? Or was basketball something that you were thinking of helping take you to the next step of what you wanted to do after graduating from university?
You know, all I ever wanted to be was a high school coach and a history teacher. I thought that was like the coolest thing because I respected my coaches, and I loved social studies and history. They were my favorite. They were my favorite teachers. They were very enthusiastic, and they were great teachers. So that's what I wanted to be. And my brothers used to bust my chops. My oldest brother became a hospital CFO. My second brother's an aeronautical engineer. My third brother's very successful entrepreneur. So they used to bust my chops like, "Hey, man, what are you going to do with a history degree?" You know, and all that. What, are you going to be a high school coach? And I'm like, yeah, that's what I want to be. And there's nothing wrong with that. And but I loved it, you know, and to me, probably the moment when I knew, like, man, I got a chance to do something in this business. I'll never forget Tom Penders, who was a great coach at the University of Texas, but I worked for Tom at Fordham. And Tom is going, actually, we're taping this interview on Thursday. Tom Penders is going into the College Basketball Hall of Fame on this Sunday in Kansas City. And I worked for Tom. And, you know, I've been reflecting a lot about it lately because the honor that he's getting, and I'm so happy for him. But he, after my second year at Fordham, I was interviewing for other jobs because they didn't have a graduate assistant position there, an opportunity to get your master's degree. And I wanted to be a full-time assistant as well, get out on the road and really spend a ton of time recruiting. And right at that point, I was kind of the young assistant on the staff at Fordham. So I'm working Villanova basketball camp. The Hall of Fame coach, Rolly Massimino, was. So I'm out in a morning at a camp, working with guys on shooting, passing, like the basketball stations, we used to call them. And Rolly Massimino's secretary says, hey, Coach Massimino wants to see you in his office. And I'm like, the hell's he want to see me for? I didn't do anything wrong. But I go in, I say, hey, good morning, coach. He says, come on in. He goes, I have your boss on the phone. I'm like, Tom Penders? He goes, yeah. He goes, I've been talking to him. So he hands me the phone. And Tom says, Jack, I know you're interviewing for other jobs. I don't want you to leave. He said, so at the time you had 15 scholarships. He said, we had 14 guys on scholarship. He says, I'm not going to use the last basketball scholarship. I'm going to put you on basketball scholarship. So, who knows what you could do with that 15 scholarship? You might find a great player at the last minute. He said, you're really important to our program. You got a great future in this game. I don't want to lose you. And I'm going to put you on basketball scholarship where you now have a place to live off campus, meal plan. We're going to pay you a stipend. You're going to have an opportunity to get your graduate degree, and you remain on our coaching staff. He goes, because I believe in you and you got a great future in this game. And I was like, whoa. So to me, I've been thinking a lot about that because he's being inducted in the Hall of Fame this weekend. And he saw something in me that at that time, when I was a young guy, I didn't see in myself. I love the game, but I didn't know what my potential was. And I guess my point is, all of us in life have to find a way to be able to help somebody else. That when you see a young lady, young man that has potential in whatever it may be, and we're talking basketball today, but it might be song or dance or music or law or medicine or broadcasting or whatever the case may be, that you have to be that person that pays it forward and says, hey, I'm here for you to help you and mentor you and maybe help you get started in your career. So I always find it really intriguing when they ask very successful people in all walks of life kind of who their mentors were and why. And I think a lot of the reason why we get where we get is someone took a chance on us and believed in us.
It's such a powerful story that you share too, because when you think about the impact that he's made, even just outside of working with you, it goes far beyond the world of basketball, and it stretches through many different branches into the roots of every community that he was involved in. And that's why I think it's so fascinating when people, it seems like there's so many stories of people that talk about how come they saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. But then as you get older, you see why they saw that in you. But that's what's part of the magic of that journey, is when you're in university, you're not thinking, I'm going to work for the Toronto Raptors and I'm going to be a head coach in NCAA and the youngest in NCAA history. You're just thinking, I want to do what the people who inspired me did when I was a kid. Teach at a high school, teach history, and coach basketball, and that's it. That's all that I'm asking for. But then when you're gifted with more, it just makes you really reflect a lot on how that journey has changed so much compared to what you thought, and just how you've evolved in your career with the Raptors. And even when having read an article when you were talking about how when coaches are let go or players are let go, released, they get to jump into the broadcast booth. So it almost seems like one of the longest, the greatest running scams, because of the fact that you go from being an idiot to an expert overnight. But at the end of the day, you did have that expertise in the first place. And there's always subjective reasons for people who are let go, whether it be a coach or a player. And I'm sure that you've felt very blessed with the opportunity you've had to become an adopted son to Canada with having worked in Toronto for the Raptors for over 20 years now?
Yeah, I mean, and obviously I use a lot of self-deprecation and humor and all that to, yeah, no, I'm blessed. There are many days I pinch myself and say, you know, how does a knucklehead like me do something like this? And I'm really fortunate and very blessed to do it. It's been a great run. I enjoy what I do. Hope to do it for a while longer. Uh, so I've been really lucky, and I feel very blessed to be an adopted son of Canada. Uh, People are wonderful. It's just been a great experience, and I feel I always joke I'm like a caraway seed in the bakery of life. You know, I'm just one small little speck as we try to promote the growth of the game of basketball in Canada, and promote it through the Raptors, promote it through the NBA, but promote the game. And I'm an ambassador for it. And so to see now Canada being number 2 in the world in representation uh, in NBA players, and to have 3 Canadian players on the Raptors, and they all kind of in their own way say, "Hey, when I was younger, I grew up watching you do the games," and it's very cool. It's really cool, and so I feel really fortunate that I've had this opportunity and this platform. I take it very seriously. I try to do the best job I can do. I'm far from perfect. I'm not everyone's cup of tea. When you're in public life, I've been a coach, I've been a broadcaster. Everyone's got their opinions. Everyone thinks they can do it better. Thinks they can do it a different way. But this is my style. This is my shtick. This is how I do it. And it's worked out pretty good so far, and we'll see how much longer it lasts. But it's been a fun run. I try my best every night to tell you why something happened, how something happened. I try to frame it for you. I try to give you a gem. I try to get you to reflect and teach a little bit about things that are happening in the game. I'll give you a little food for thought, and also have a lot of fun doing it. And it's funny. I was watching, was it Carpool Karaoke? It was a James Corden. I can't remember the guy's name. You know the guy I'm talking about, the guy, James Corden. And I heard an interview with him. He was on with Howard Stern. And he was talking, and Howard Stern's a fabulous interviewer. He's probably the best interviewer I've ever heard. You can debate his humor, but when he has people on, I've never heard a guy who does a better job interviewing people. But James Corden said on the interview, he said, what I do for a living, I try to be joyful. I try to have joy. And I think that would be, if you had to ask me kind of my style as a broadcaster, I try to be joyful. I try to have fun. Now, there's going to be times I'm going to be blunt and very serious and direct. Maybe sometimes I shouldn't be as much, but I am. But what you see is what you get. And but I try to be joyful and have fun with it, and enthusiastic and excited about it. And I try to sell the Raptors, and I try to be fair to the opposing team, and I try to be fair to the game. So you can't win because there's always going to be a time where someone will say, "Well, you're a homer." Then there's other times someone will say, "You were too hard on them." You can't win. You can never win, but you just do the best you can, and you try to call it the way you see it. You try to be fair to everybody, and you try to present and paint the game in as best a light as you can.
And have fun doing it. And I think that of all the broadcasters that I've watched through football, basketball, I don't know if there's any ones that have as much fun as you do calling Raptors games. And you'd think growing up that someone as a kid would think, oh, this guy must be Canadian. He loves the Raptors. He's so enthusiastic. But being from Brooklyn, you really bring the best flavor of the unique part of New York to Raptors broadcasts, and especially with your catchphrases having become iconic in the lore of Raptors basketball. I think that's part of what makes it also so fun to watch, is because you don't want to watch a broadcast where it seems like you're listening to a university lecture. You want to watch a broadcast where you're able to laugh and have fun and smile, but also sit down and reflect and think when you're listening to some of the coaching points or keys to the game, because it is all about learning too, even while you're
Yeah,
having fun.
no, it's funny you say that about the college lecture because, you know, there, I mean, look, I feel pretty confident that I could talk at a whole nother level of kind of like what I'm seeing. And at the same time, like it would come off as a little bit arrogant because I'm trying to like, hey, I know more than you. No, I'm Joe Bag of Donuts. You know, I'm calling the game for Joe Sixpack sitting on his couch watching the game, and I want to keep his attention or her attention. I want them to say, hey, you know, the game is, yeah, one night it's great, another night it might not be great, but hey, I'm going to tune in and stay tuned in because you know they're having some fun and they're entertaining and I'm learning something. So to me, that's part of being an ambassador. That's part of, you know, there's been a lot of good seasons with the Raptors and a lot of good games. Those are easy. When things aren't good and the team's not good and the team's getting beat or struggling that night, that's when you got to do your best work and you have to be able to have fun and be positive and be able to as well to present the reality of what's going on and be fair to all sides.
It's a great point, because for those who would just have watched the Raptors more recently, they would sit back and think, oh, this must be easy because we're enjoying the ride and the Raptors are great and we the North and Drake's jumping on the broadcast and he's having fun. But for those that watched when I was growing up in the era when making the playoffs was like winning the championship, it's definitely not as easy. And having seen a 22-60 season or 23-43 or 34-48, a stretch of really years where they really struggled, it's not easy. And that's part of what makes, and as one of my favorite teachers once told me, you know, the great artist makes the performance look really easy. That's what makes them brilliant. And that's how you guys, credit to you and Matt for being able to do a great job during those years when the Raptors are struggling. It's always a lot more difficult than people think because they don't see the behind the scenes or they don't know what has to go into a broadcast to make it entertaining if the team's getting smoked by 30.
Yeah, no, and you know, as a former athlete, you know, just losing's very easy. It's very easy. Winning's really hard. It's really hard. And at the same time, uh, putting on a average broadcast is pretty easy. You could just show up and not be prepared and kind of wing it. To be good at it, you got to really put the time in, and it's got to come natural and it's got to sound natural. But like Matt, he has a shtick. I have a shtick. You know, like we're prepared. We're ready for this. We've paid our dues, you know. And the same with a Chuck Swirsky, who I work with, and a Paul Jones, and a Leo Routens, and a Rob Black, and a Kayla Gray, and a Kate Burness, and all the different great people I've worked with over the years. They all are very dedicated, professional, high-end people, you know, and they're really good at what they do. So it's, but to me, it's just a fun gig, and it's really enjoyable. And there's a method to our madness, you know, and but it's one of those things too. I think when you look at calling Raptor games, our situation is different than any other situation in the league. We are calling games on national television. The other 29 teams are calling games on a regional basis. So you're calling games on a national network too. You know, like calling the games on TSN and my colleagues that call them on Sportsnet. This is not some little small cable network. You know, this is like the real deal. So you have to call a game that is obviously Raptor centric. And at the same time, it has to have a little bit of a national feel to it. And it has to have an objectivity to it as well about because you're calling an NBA game about, you're calling NBA basketball. So it's always a balancing act of trying to kind of make all the masters happy and serve a lot of different elements of it. But it's a challenging, but it's a really fun experience.
It is great fun for you guys and also for all the fans watching at home. And Jack, we are getting towards the end of our time on today's episode, so I wanted to ask 3 questions to have a little more fun and wrap up before we part for today.
Okay.
So the first question is, what is your favorite era of history to talk about, to study, and just to really dive into?
Wow. I would say probably, unfortunately, the Great Depression, and kind of coming out of World War One, and then the great boom of the 20s, the Roaring 20s, and then the real challenging times of the Depression and what we learned as a country or as a world about ourselves, and how important it is to be resilient. And then the world goes to war again, 1939, and just that period. So that period between, I guess, that period between World War One, the Depression, and then World War II is a fascinating study on resiliency, and a fascinating, and the world. It's funny, I was born in 1963, so I remember the Vietnam War and what took place, and and a lot of older guys in my neighborhood had fought in World War II and fought in Korea, and now a major percentage of them aren't with us anymore. But I feel like it's again like a fascinating study about just that. It's to see. I'll never forget when the Raptors played in London. I went to the bunker that Winston Churchill would live in every night when London was being bombed every night. And how he led a nation through some incredibly difficult times. And so, and obviously my mom is 94. She was born in 1927, chatting with her. And she grew up in Ireland and immigrated to the United States. And just the challenges and why people immigrate, why, opportunity. I think Canada is a wonderful place because there's so many people that have just gotten there or first generation. And I love that because I'm first generation. My parents came from nothing. My dad came over on a boat from Ireland. My mom came over on a plane, went to Iceland, and then Gander, Nova Scotia, and then down to New York, and came from nothing. And so I'm living the American dream and the Canadian dream. And so to me, I think that, I guess the word, probably it's a long-winded answer, but I think resiliency is a big thing in everything.
Second question is, what is your favorite crime or gangster movie? Gotta ask someone from Brooklyn. It's a must.
I would say Goodfellas is an amazing movie. One of my all-time favorite songs, Layla by Derek and the Dominoes. At the end of that movie, the last scene in that movie, everybody's getting whacked, and that is that's a great movie. Probably the other one I really like is The Departed. That's a star-studded, and it's kind of a loose interpretation of Whitey Bulger in Boston. And Jack Nicholson is just fabulous in that movie. And there's a lot of great actors in that movie. And obviously I'm Irish from Brooklyn, but there's Irish music in it, all that. So probably those would be the two movies that I would say jump off the page at me.
The final question I have for you is, what is one word to describe what it feels like and what it means to you to be a father of three?
Wow. I don't know if I could use one word. Pride, joy, love. I think those would be the. I'm blessed. You know, my wife was the women's soccer coach at Niagara. She was a Division One head coach as well. I talked about earlier thanking that ball. I don't have that person in my life who I totally overachieved. I mean, I not only hit a home run, I hit a grand slam with her. She's the best. And being able to adopt three boys, and it's been an incredible ride. It's not easy. Parenthood is really challenging. It's a lot of work. It's very joyful, very frustrating. There's a lot of anger. There's a lot of frustration. There's a lot of laughs. There's a lot of love. There's a lot of great, great times. But as I always say, there's a lot of twists and turns and ups and downs. But I think you stick to your guns and you tell them what they need to hear rather than what they want to hear, and you give them tough love. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think too often now, nobody wants to offend anybody. Nobody wants to be direct. And I think there's times where you got to say, hey, you know what? I want you here, and you're only here right now. That's not good enough. We got to get to here. And here's some things we have to do to improve. I love you. I care for you. I got your back. I'm there with you every step of the journey. But this is your potential, and you're only here right now. I see this in you. You know, like I'm seeing the forest, you're seeing the tree, and it's my job to kind of stretch you out. I had a great, I talk about history teacher. My ninth grade history teacher in high school, Mr. Kennedy, he said to our class one time, and it always stuck with me, and I'm sounding like an old guy here, but the Eagles, great band, they have a song called Already Gone. And in the song, and Mr. Kennedy said he goes, here's my job. He goes, sometimes you can see the stars, but you can't see the light. Because you guys all see the stars, because it's my job to show you the light. And I think whether that be as a parent, as a coach, as a mentor, in any way, it's our job to help you see the light. So I try my best as a father. I've tried my best as a coach. I've tried my best as a friend or a mentor or whatever, to always try to say, here's the light, and you're better than even what you think, and let's get there. And I'm here to help you get there.
Jack, those are very powerful words and great reflection to live by and to always think of, because I love that analogy. People will sometimes to see the trees, but you can't see the forest. It's very true, and it's very important for us to always consider. And with that, I want to thank you for having been on today's episode. It was a great pleasure to chat basketball with you, and also about the great things that carry us forward in life to always reach our potential. So thank you very much.
Well, it's been an honor and a privilege, and good luck to you in your budding broadcast career, and as you come to Toronto to start your new chapter in that. And I want to wish you all the best, and hopefully we'll cross paths somewhere down the road.
Thank you very much for the kind words. And thank you to the listener for taking in today's episode with Raptors and March Madness basketball analyst, Jack Armstrong.